not normally the kind that gets nervous, but occasionally things get my attention. And the realization that we have just celebrated the final Shabuah harvest, the time of our celebration of 7 and the Shabat, prior to the day that it will be fulfilled. Recognizing that the responsibility for maximizing the productivity of this harvest is with the final Zeroah. I am a bit nervous that we will complete the work that Yahweh has laid out before us in time to accomplish all that needs to be done for Shabuah to be as productive and as fruitful as is possible. 12 months. That's all we have. Now, I've never worried so much about the Teruah Lakat as I have the Shabuah Qatsyr. First, Qatsyrs are bigger than Lakats. One is a harvest, the other is a gleaning. But the reason that the Teruah has never bothered me much, at least from a concern point of view, is that I'm going to be accompanied by the greatest orator ever, Elia, a man who just oozes credibility. And so we're sharing the responsibility, and Yahweh has made it abundantly clear that during the last 3.5 years, while Elia and I are on the Temple Mount, he is going to provide copious indications in support of us. We're going to be performing under a scrolling banner that Yahweh has said that he's going to fly from the sky. We have Malak performing all manner of miracles, and I'm looking here at my Wookiee, who looks like he wants to participate. But no Wookiee for us right now. And so God's going to make a major contribution. And I am just not as worried about it. And I also know that there's going to be a brief time. I don't know if it'll be from Earth time, the full 3.5 years, or 3.5 minutes, but there's going to be a brief time of recharging where all of the covenant family are brought to Shamayim to be in Yahweh's company and to celebrate this harvest, recognizing that it looks like there'll be myself and 8 others that will be brought back, even in advance of our meeting with Elia on the Temple Mount, which occurs on 4/4 of 30, the first of Abib, 3.5 years before Yahweh's return with Dod. But just that, even if it were a fraction of a second, but being there in Yahweh's presence, because time flows differently, being able to ask Yahweh, okay, I've done my best to garner all of the pieces of this puzzle together and to push away all the religious rubbish so that it could be seen clearly, to explain how all of the pieces of the puzzle that you have provided us of your portrait are properly understood and seen from the appropriate perspective. But what did I miss? What do I miss that's still important? Is there anything that I got wrong that needs to be corrected? Let's make certain this message is astute and accurate. So that's the first thing I want to ask him. Beyond the fact of being overjoyed that he has done as he has promised, and he's harvested the covenant's children, and we're all there celebrating Shabuah with him. That's going to be pretty extraordinary, but I'm not going to lose sight of the fact that we have a big job to do. Still, even after Shabuah is accomplished, then there is Teruah, and then there's the sacrifice of the red heifer, and then there's the return on Yom Kippurim, and then there is all of the judgment that must take place where all of those who have tormented God's people are held accountable. And then there's the teaching of this mortal remnant that enters the restoration of the earth to the conditions experienced in Eden. And we're going to be significantly involved in that. And then there's the role of being Dod's herald, the king's spokesman and right arm. So it was a lot to do from this point on. But there is a tremendous difference, I think, between being asked to do this and having Yahweh's support and his seven spirits and finding thousands upon thousands of insights and being the first to figure out almost every major thing that's important to God and report it. It has been an extraordinary life, well lived. But there's something else just about being there. And I know that's what's going to happen a year from now. And yet my mindset is going to be, well, let's prepare to do what comes next as well as we can do it. Let's get back on the job. So here's where we are. And yes, it does. I'm not a person that very often gets nervous. I'm pretty much calm in any manner of situation. I've been in circumstances that would have killed almost anybody else, but prior preparation and control over the situation, I have survived time in and time again, and I will continue to. But this one clearly has my attention. And the biggest issue here is not just giving it our all, my all. I mean, I've put in 24 years. I've done more than anyone else has done previously. In terms of doing what Yahweh has asked, I've done as much, if not more, than anyone who's come before. I've written more. I've perceived more. I've shared more than anyone heretofore. So I can be reasonably proud of what we've accomplished together. But we're working for Yahowah. We're doing the job that is the most important to him of all time, bringing his people back to him, reintroducing his name, and reacquainting them with his beloved Son, our Savior and King, Dod. No one wants to disappoint God. So we're doing this program as a continuation of Qatsyr-Harvest, knowing now that we are on the final run to the fulfillment of Shabat, May 22nd, 2026, and that we also know that what follows is going to be horrific. We want to provide God's people with every fortification that is possible so that they understand the horrid nature of Islam, so that they understand the rubbish that Christianity piled on top of the truth about Dod being the Messiah and the Son of God and the one who suffered crucifixion, fulfilling Pesach in 33 CE, and so that we equip them to know for certain that Yahweh is the proper pronunciation of Yahweh's name and that it is essential for them, and that there are 5 conditions of the covenant. Each of the 7 Moed Mikre is important in their lives, and there are 4 more to be fulfilled. This is our mission. So we're going to pick this up where we left off. We were in the 2nd chapter of Hosea, meaning he saves or he delivers. This is Hosea 6:2, and it's one that's I would call a head scratcher. It reads, 2 days. 2 days. He will choose to revive and sustain our lives. On the 3rd day, he will establish our restoration, encouraging and raising us so that we can stand up and endure. Then we will live. in his presence. So what are those 2 days and what is the third? If it was just 2 days, the answer would be pretty much straightforward. Well, perhaps. You'd say, okay, what are the two most important 2 days of human history? In the history of Israel, they would be Pesach and Matzah, the prolonging of the lives of the children of Israel and their freedom from religious and political corruption. If you were to say, what are the two most important days relative to the Moed Mikre, these restoring witnesses of the eternal testimony to be called out and meet with God, you'd say Pesach and Matzah's fulfillment by Dode in 33 CE, year 4000 Yah, bringing the covenant family eternal life, opening the door to Yahweh's home, and perfecting us by removing our political and religious guilt and leaving it in Sheol, never to be seen again. If you're just speaking of 2 days, well, 2 days would be Shabuah and Towrah, the very harvest that I was talking to you about. They are the only two unfulfilled harvests. They are the most important things to me because they're my responsibility. If I don't perform well between now and then the last two Moed Mikre are going to disappoint Yahweh and are going to deprive Yisrael. So these 2 days are exceedingly important. It's the standing wheat harvest of Shabuah, representing mature individuals, both of Yisrael and also Goyim. And then the Towrah gleaning. It's the bookends of the time of Jacob's troubles, the beginning and the end of them. As I've said, May 22nd, 2026 is Shabat, and then the Shabat of September 23rd, 2033. These would be examples of the two most important days. Now, from Yahweh's point, they aren't not the historic Pesach and Matzah, not the Dode's fulfillment of Pesach and Matzah, not the upcoming harvest of Shabuah and Towrah. None of those are the most important 2 days from Yahweh's perspective. Yahweh's most important day by far is Yom Kippurim, the Day of Reconciliation. This is his celebration day. This is the thing that Yahweh has existed for. It's all for that day, where Yisrael and Yehudim come back together again and are reunited with Yahweh, and we celebrate the homecoming. It's the most celebratory, enjoyable day in godly history, if you will. God's been around a long time. This is the day that he looked forward to more than any other, and it's why I'm so concerned about the work we do on behalf of Shabuah and Towrah, because we're providing the audience. And without an audience, there's no celebration, which means that day can't be pleasing to God. And the result of Kippurim on this return with his beloved son and the family reunion is that we re-enter the conditions we experienced in Eden. And we return to Eden. And that's a pretty extraordinary experience for you. We're going to camp out for 1,000 years together. That first day is going to be marvelous. So those are all possibilities. But when you add a third day, it can't be the last two because, well, because those are the last two. And it could be, when Yahweh was talking about the Exodus, he kept on telling Pharaoh and all who would listen, let my people go so they can spend these 3 days with me, working with me. And those 3 days would be Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim. And Bikurim would be when they crossed the Gulf of Aqaba, the Red Sea, and then were born into the covenant, if you will. And of course, in 33 CE, the third day would be with Pesach and Matzah leading to Bikurim, and to firstborn children, and to Yahweh being acquainted with his beloved son. And with the two upcoming harvests, Shabuah and Towrah, they lead, as I have said, to Sukkah. That would be the third day. So all of those are possible. Are they all true? Now, it says here that through 2 days, he will choose to revive and sustain our lives. So our lives were revived and sustained. Historic Pesach and Matzah, Dod's fulfillment, 33 CE, Pesach and Matzah, and will occur on Shabuah and Towrah, 2 days that he will choose to revive and sustain our lives. All of those who participate in those two harvests are going to become immortal. They are going to be revived. They're going to become God's sons and daughters forevermore. It's a second life, if you will, for all of them. So all of those things match. On the third day, he will establish our restoration, encouraging and raising us so that we can stand up and endure. Now, this kum, which means to take a stand, really doesn't speak so much of Bikurim. Now, because we're not restored on Bikurim, we just become family. We are raised in the sense of only in the sense of having our the sense that we are empowered and enriched on this day. But we're certainly not raised up beyond that. And beyond Dod, no one else was raised on Bikurim. But as it moves to the third day of Kippurim, following Sukkah and Shabuah and Towrah, then it is the day of restoration for the mortal remnant of Yahweh. And is the day to encourage God's people to stand up and endure with him, and literally, physically taking a stand to endure with him as they witness the sacrifice of the red heifer, and then are prepared to live in God's presence as this mortal remnant. And we will live in his presence. Well, that pretty much takes us to Shabuah and Towrah, leading to Kippurim, because that is the result. Now, it's true that when those who celebrate and observe and understand the benefits of and tie them into the conditions of the covenant, Pesach and Matzah will live in God's presence as a result of Bikurim, but it doesn't actually happen at that time. These are the means that we prepare ourselves so that we can avail ourselves of this on Shabuah, and then again on Towrah. I don't know if I'm just adding so much detail that I'm confusing people, but that certainly isn't my intent. My intent is to be very precise so that we understand exactly what God is talking about, because this is life and death for his people. And I want you to understand how each of these things play into this, because there are a variety of options, and I think there's some truth to all of them. So while there are different ways to interpret the timing of this statement, the most direct, of course, would be to see it within the scope of what is being presented in Yirmiyah 31, the prophecy we have just considered. It means that while Dod enabled the way back to God through his fulfillment of Pesach and Matzah, ultimately, it is Pesach and Matzah that make these two upcoming harvests, Shabuah and Towrah, possible. All of the beneficiaries of the Shabuah and Towrah harvest will be there because of what Dod did on Pesach and Matzah. Shabuah and Towrah will bring us to the family reunion. Everyone who participates in the harvest and the gleaning, the Qatsyr and the Lakat, will be there in the front row seats. This is the top billing right there. You're going to be ringside for the sacrifice of the red heifer and for the return of Yahowah and Dod. So that is the beauty of Shabuah and Towrah, is that you're a beneficiary of Pesach and Matzah, and you get the front row seats for sacrifice of the red heifer and the family reunion. And that's, of course, occurs on Kippurim, the 120th Yobel year of 6,000 Yah in 2033. And this is going to lead to living in Yahweh's presence on the third day. This way, the ultimate expression of Bikurim becomes, in practical terms, Sukkah, where we camp out with God. Now, considering that the subject of the revival and the preservation of our lives, leading to a time when we are established and restored in the relationship with God, such that we can stand in Yahweh's presence, this, of course, is the most obvious answer. So our lives are extended during Pesach, and they are restored during Matzah, so that on Bikurim we become part of Yahweh's family. And this is what makes it possible for our Heavenly Father to gather us in on Shabuah, the Qatsyr of standing grain, and of Towrah, the olive harvest of Yehudim, on May 22nd, 2026, and September 23rd, 2033. Where we are prepared to enter God's presence and where we become the foremost spectators, if you will, for the family reunion when Yahowah and Dod arrive on Kippurim, sunset October 2nd, 2033, year 6,000 Yah. So it is then that we will engage to free the earth of all of those who no longer belong, all while reconciling the final remnant of Jews back into the covenant. On this point, I cheated a little bit on the program we did earlier today, which was the gateway out of the Holocaust. And I did what I don't typically do, which is I read ahead. I wanted to see really how far we had to go with that and whether or not we could do multiple shows on it to start a new one called Gateway Out of the Holocaust. And what I find is what we're headed to is God saying, there are going to be lots of olives that are going to be lopped off and discarded. I mean, lots of people that are not going to make it into the celebration of Yom Kippurim. God's not going to start the conditions experienced in Eden with religious riffraff. And so in Isaiah 17 leading to 18, we find that 18 is developed on the lines of those who are going to be excluded. And so the earth will be liberated from the religious, from the political, from the militant, and from the conspiratorial, from all anti-Semites. Now, also relevant, with the earth in the throes of death, as it will have been from the time of Jacob's troubles, and with evil exploding as never before, as we are witnessing in the seismograph of anti-Semitism, there will be a tremendous amount of rubbish to eliminate. And the environment will have to be terraformed for the planet to be restored to Eden-like conditions, where we can enjoy camping out in Yahweh's presence. God's not going to camp out in a swamp. And that begins, of course, on the third day of Sukkah camping out, if you were to look at Towrah, Kippurim, and Sukkah. The intent of Shabuah and Towrah is to remove the covenant family from a world filled with death and deceit at every turn. At least Shabuah, Towrah, is a kind of a unique gleaning of God's people. And you have to understand the timing of it. So Shabuah is to remove both the Goyim and the Yehudim, who have capitalized on the sacrifice that Dode made in 33 CE to fulfill Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim, and those beneficiaries are elevated into God's company, and they're transformed into spiritual beings akin to light. Pretty good situation. And they're kept out of the time of Jacob's troubles. They don't have to witness the suffering, just as God says, I'm not going to witness it either. I don't even want to see it. Now, the Towrah harvest is different because it takes place the evening before the sacrifice of the Adam of Parah that prepares the adulterous woman of Yisrael that has been adulterous through Judaism, through religion, and through creating also Christianity and Islam. Rabbis created both of those religions, all three religions. And so on Shabuah, that evening before the Adam of Parah makes the sacrifice to rectify the relationship with the remnant of Yisrael, you might say, well, why just the evening before would you have a harvest, even if it is a gleaning, and then have this major event with the Adam of Parah the next day? It doesn't make any sense. Well, and I've had some people even in the covenant family who have written me from Facebook saying, I don't get that. It doesn't make any sense to me. Well, it makes perfect sense to me. Because you see, there's a tremendous difference between those who will benefit from that teruah gleaning that evening and those who will benefit from the sacrifice of the Adam of Parah. And that really explains the difference between what God achieved through Dode and what he will achieve through me. We're not in the same league. Dode opened the door to eternal life in God's family, and he carried our guilt away so that we would remain eternally perfect in God's eyes, leading to us being adopted into the covenant family and enriched and empowered by God. That is why the Shabuah harvest is of Bakurim. So everyone that participates in these two harvests, the Qatsyr and the Lakat, are going to become eternal. They are not going to have physical bodies unless they were to choose to transform some of their spiritual energy into matter. They're elevated to explore the dimensionality of the universe. They're able to be eternal in time, exceedingly empowered, brilliant beyond measure. This is an extraordinary transformation. And well, we know that is apropos for all of those who will benefit from the Shabuah harvest. It's also true of those who will benefit from the teruah gleaning. There'll be 7 years after one harvest and before the gleaning. And during that time, many people are going to benefit from the Yada Yahowah series. They're going to benefit from the Yahowah blog. They're going to recognize that the rabbis have lied to them and that the political elite have misled them. And they're going to return to Yahowah. And they're going to capitalize on what Dode has done. And they're going to be ready for that harvest. And they will, as such, be covenant. And when they're harvested, they're going to have all of the same rights and capabilities of those who benefited from Shabuah. Now, there's not going to be any of them, of those olives that are harvested at this time, that are going to have been covenant for any more than 7 years. And most will be covenant for less than 3.5 years. But nonetheless, they are. They're spiritual beings. Now, to be left behind on teruah means that you didn't capitalize on what Dode has done, that you didn't return to embrace Yahweh's name, you didn't accept the conditions of the covenant, you didn't celebrate the Moed Mikre as Yahweh laid them out and intended. But it also means that if you're there and are going to benefit from the sacrifice of the red heifer, that you are not overtly religious, that you are not overtly political, that you're not anti-Semitic, that you're not conspiratorial, you're not militant, you're not anti-Semitic, and you're open to the benefit of that sacrifice so that you are willing to accept and acknowledge that it is Yahowah who is returning with Dod his son, and this will be your last opportunity to do that. And those people who benefit from that will remain mortal, but they're prepared to enter the millennial Shabat as mortals, and this final remnant of Yisrael. And, it's going to be our job from that point on to teach them so they grow up and become contributory members of God's family, and that they survive that 1,000 years and stay the course. But just as the sun is a source of light and that the moon reflects light, just as the king sets the rules and the herald simply echoes what he has to say, the sacrifices that Dod made are far more important than the one that I'm going to make as the Adam of Parah. Mine gets you into the family reunion. And then what I will and others will teach you from that point on is another matter to keep you alive. So that's where we are. And that's what God is conveying at this time. So the intent of Shabuah and Towrah is to remove the covenant family from this world filled with death and deceit, although one actually removes you prior to the time of Yaakov's troubles, and the other just gets you into that same status before God's return with Dod. And having kept us safe, we're going to be part of the joyous crowd that will accompany Dod upon his Kippurim return to reconcile the relationship between Yahowah and the surviving mortal remnant of Yisrael. Collectively, we're all going to camp out together during the millennial expression of Sukkah, although it's going to be, an interesting time because there's going to be 3 different types of people at that time going into the millennial celebration of Sukkah. It's kind of like the fact that there's been 3 options for human souls all the way along. You can choose to be part of God's eternal covenant family. You can make decisions that cause you to be in a place of eternal separation from God. That would be in Sheol versus Shamayim. And you can squander your life such that at the end of your life, there's no reward and no penalty, and your soul simply ceases to exist. Those are the 3 options. As we move through Towrah to Kippurim and into Sukkah, there will also be 3 categories of individuals. One will be full-fledged covenant members with the tenfold increase of Bakurim, and another tenfold increase and a doubling of that tenfold increase, if you will, on Shabuah. And then those who get in by the skin of their teeth at the very end during Towrah. So these are all beings. We will all be supernatural. We'll all be spiritual beings akin to light. And the carrier of our souls will be of a spiritual nature, not a material nature, which gives us enormous capabilities, but it does not preclude us from taking material form and enjoying this world as a body whenever we choose to do so. I'm hoping to come back during the millennial Shabbat as a even physical body. It'll be a little buffed up from the one you see now, a little younger, a little stouter, better shape, and that physical body is going to be in a position not only to do things that are important for God's family, but also to enjoy the earth and the conditions that God restores in Eden. I'm going to go cruise the 7 seas and fly the great skies and have lots of wonderful celebrations in beautiful places. I'm intending to enjoy this in addition to work. Working is good, it's productive, but part of working is enjoying the fruits of your labor. And so I'm looking forward to doing both, and we'll be able to do both. And if you want to sneak out during that 1,000 years to go explore on the extent of our galaxy, the Milky Way, or another galaxy out there, and the planets surrounding it, you'll be able to do so. Time will run differently, and this transition between energy and matter will enable those of us who are spiritual beings to experience both. And I think that's going to be marvelous. Okay, so that's one class. The second class is the mortal remnant of Israel. I think they're going to be different than pure mortals today in the sense that they're going to have extended lives and they're not going to be truncated prior to the 1,000-year celebration of Sukkah, unless they do something stupid. And I'm absolutely convinced that those who enter the millennial Shabbat as mortals will be able to conceive children who also will have free will. And all these mortals will continue to have free will, and they will be able to choose at any point, not God, if they wish to. That will be a fatal choice, but they will have that opportunity. But they're mortals. They cannot go off and see galaxies far, far away. They're mortals. They're capable of being killed. They're going to have the opportunity, though, to become covenant and to live forever. But they're mortal Yehudim, the final remnant, very special people. Then they're going to repopulate Yisrael. The third group of people are Goyim. And there will be a group of Goyim based upon their attitude and their aptitudes. They're going to have the opportunity to enter the millennial Shabbat as the productive force that kind of keeps the earth going. They will do everything that needs to be done from a work point of view so that the mortal remnant of Israel can be about the work of Yahowah, and this Goyim group will be about the work of supporting the needs of everyone who is on the earth. It'll be a really good gig, and this is not a bad thing. Their lives are extended. They would have just ended because they did not know Yahowah. They didn't capitalize on the Shabat-Harvest. And it means, though, that they were not anti-Semitic. They were not overtly religious. They were not overtly religious. And they were open to being productive members of the ongoing community. Those will be the three individuals, the three types of people at this time. So God gives us a lot of information that we can use to kind of map out where you think you're going to be at this time. So collectively, we're all in one way or another going to be camping out together during the millennial expression of Sukkah. There's going to be a regular cadence to things, a celebration of the Shabbat and the relationship with God. Each of the 7 Moed Mikre will be celebrated going forward. It'll be a little different, and we'll look back on them. But the members of the immortal remnant are going to look forward on them as well. So therefore, these 2 days will lead to the third, as this plays out at the beginning of the 7 promises and 7 years before the fireworks of September and October of 2033, with the harvest leading to this grand celebration during the first 10th and 15th days of the 7th month in year 6000 Yah. So as mentioned, there is a third way to appreciate the merit of these 3 days. 2,000 years transpired from year 2000 Yah, when the covenant was affirmed by Abraham and Yishak on Mount Moriah, to year 4000 Yah, with its benefits were provided by Dod's fulfillment of Chag Matzah, enabling us to participate in the benefit of the Bereth. Under this scenario, the third day is symbolic of the millennial celebration of the Shabbat of Sukkah, which would be year 6000 to 7000 Yah, camping out with God. While Passover and unyeasted bread leading to Bikurim remain an essential part of the way home and to living with God, nary one in a million Jews has capitalized on their offer. And all of this, the entire purpose of Hosha, indeed, of Yirmiyah, Yashiyah, Zechariah too, is to make Yahweh's people aware of their opportunity to reconcile their relationship so they can be part of the Shabuah and then Towrah harvest, or at least be there and capitalize on the sacrifice of the red heifer so that they are participants in the homecoming. Everything is pointing to this moment when, after Yahweh returns for his family, we will enjoy the return to Eden. But you'll recall in Eden, there were a couple of dim-witted moments, and it led to a bad outcome. So it's still possible for that mortal remnant to be dunderheads. Our job going forward is to be the antidote to dunderheadedness. I think that's going to be a much more pleasant and easier job than it is right now, being the battering rod used to break down that wall that separates Yehudim from Yahowah. But it is the challenge going forward. So it is reassuring to see Yahowah affirming what I have deduced and conveyed. We come to know our God by investing the time and effort required to learn who he is, what he is offering, and what he expects in return. And in this case, he is directing his people to the one cultivating the harvest and the ultimate homecoming through Yada Yahowah. That is our job. It's among the three most important missions in world history. Yep. It just is. The removing God's people from the crucible of human oppression and religious corruption in Mitzrayim and giving them the Torah directions was one of those three most important jobs. Dode, lives three lives. His job was to unify Israel, acquire Jerusalem as the capital, acquire the Temple Mount, so that the home for Yahweh's name could be built, defend God's people, and then to return to open the door to God's home, to life eternal, and to carry our guilt away so that we could be part of the covenant family, and he will return as king of forevermore and of everything. But nobody knows what he did. Nobody can benefit from his return. There will be no subjects for Dode. There will be no family for him to govern, and no beneficiaries of his sacrifice of Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim without that third guy. So there is a third Zeroah, and his job is to Yada Yahowah, to know Yahweh so he can introduce God's people to Yahweh and to become fully acquainted with our King so that the world capitalizes on our Savior. It reads, we want to know, Wadayath. We desire information so that we are aware. We want to be perceptive and discerning. We want to be discriminating. We choose to invest considerable time and effort to pursue Yada Yahowah. This stage of his journey is as sure as sunrise. He will come for us, like the showers of the spring rains, as they enable the gathering of the harvest by refreshing and renewing those of the land who accept the source of teaching and guidance, which will be on display. Hosea, he liberates 6:3. I actually tear up. My eyes are watery now. I do so inside when I see God having such confidence in what we would achieve together that 2,700 years ago, he scribed the name of the books that we would write together, that he offered the name of the website that would bring God's people home, that he would acknowledge what we have invested the last 24 years accomplishing. I mean, think of the confidence that God has to have in our collaboration for him to do that. It's, I think that several of you know that we lost a number of people that we thought were part of our covenant family to a vicious rebellion by a psychopath that was very clever at luring people away. And one of those that was lured away, it's a tragedy. I'm bothered by it all the time. Was a beloved woman that served as the publisher of these books and was so instrumental. And the many times that we needed to improve them, expand them, correct them, um, the whole transformation into this unified look under the Yada Yahowah branding and the beauty of them being presented in the white and the gold and the blue, um, all consistently. Um, and then to have those books available for publishing, so you can buy the paperback through Amazon and being presented appropriately on the website. She and that webmaster left in that fractured family event. And it hurts because of the fact that we have a job to do. And they bailed out on us. And that's a real shame. It's I view it as inexcusable. I have no idea if they'll ever come to their senses and return, but I'm here to tell you that it's important. When God, 2,700 years ago, tells you that it is Yada Yahowah that is bringing his people back home, that these events of pertaining to these 2 days that lead to the third, the restoration of his people, is based explicitly on Yada Yahowah. And you're not committed to that. When you've been part of it and you know it, that's exceedingly sad and disappointing. But it is also exceedingly gratifying, as I've said, that Yahowah would acknowledge what we have worked to create. These 35 books that you see behind me, the 35 books that are available on the bookshelf at YAHOWAH.com. I think there's 34 currently, but I'm well into the completion of Coming Home Volume 4, which will be the 35th. And as soon as we transition to the new website we're going to have in the company, because it tells so much about our path to this place, which would be a 36th. I'm not positive, but I'm hopeful we'll actually be able to represent Tea with Jairus, because it led to Prophet of Doom, and Prophet of Doom, which I don't want shown anymore because, well, I went too long without correcting it, and I learned so much in the interim time that I'm very happy to have it replaced by Goddamn Religion, which is so much more powerful and complete. But here, in the context of these 2 days, which lead to the third and to the restoration of the relationship and living with God in his presence, God says, we want to know. This is likely being put in the voice of God's people, those who benefit from Dod's fulfillment of Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim. Those who benefit from the Shabuah, Qatsyr, and the Teruah Lakat. Those who avail themselves of the sacrifice of the Adam Parah, this bloody red man of the earth who is so productive from God's perspective. Those who witness the great homecoming on the day of reconciliations and are now camping out with God. All of them will have availed themselves of what God is offering by coming to know, by choosing to invest the time and effort to pursue what they can read and learn from Yada Yahowah. It's by coming to know through investing the considerable time and effort to pursue the knowledge and the understanding, this ticket to Shabuah, to Teruah, to being part of that homecoming on Kippurim, so that you enter Sukkah. The means to all of that is in Yada Yahowah. And you might say, well, wait a minute. No, I'm just going to read the Torah, I'll be fine. I'm going to read the prophets, I'll be fine. No, you won't be fine. Torah has been available for 2,450 years. Excuse me, 3,450 years. You're not fine. The prophets have been available for anywhere from 2,500 to 3,500 years. You're not fine. Not a single Yehud paid any attention to what God actually said. Not a single Yehud came to understand that God despises religion. And so long as his people are religious, they will be estranged from one another. Not a single one of you understood there were 5 terms and conditions of the covenant that must be met or could articulate them. They didn't understand that the 5 benefits of the covenant were all delivered by the fulfillment of the first 3 Moed Mikre. Not a single one of them understood that Pesach opens the door to life, and that Matzah removes our guilt by Dod carrying it into Sheol, and that Bikurim is being part of the covenant family where we are enriched and empowered by God, and that it was Dod David in his second of 3 lives that fulfilled them. There wasn't a soul on earth that recognized any one of those things. And if you don't know them, you can't participate in the Qatsyr-Harvest. It's nullified. And if you don't know them, you're not going to be part of the Towrah gleaning. And if it weren't for the things that we are sharing now in Yada Yahowah, there was no one going to be there for the sacrifice of the red heifer, which might as well be skipped because there will be no homecoming, because there wouldn't be anyone to come home to. All of this is possible because of the collaborative effort that Yahowah and I have engaged in over these past 24 years, every waking moment for 24 years to comprise the Yada Yahowah series and bring it to you freely. YAHOWAH.com. This, the Yahowah blog, is because Yahowah says, young man, you've written enough. It's time for you to speak to my people. You are now the books. Tell them what you know. That is why we're here. God's people need to know. We desire knowledge. We choose to invest the considerable time and effort to pursue Yada Yahowah. Being aware of and understanding, actually knowing Yahowah. This stage of his journey is as sure as sunrise. You have 2 choices there. You can have God making the journey and say that he is as sure as sunrise. But where's God going? No, the journey that he's talking about is the fellow that he used to write Yada Yahowah. And he's saying that my arrival to do this, my commitment to it, the completion of them, is as sure as sunrise. It's decided upon, appointed, established, proven, arranged. And it's going to occur at the dawn of God's return. He says, he will come for us. This is, Yashaya, or Hosea in this case, is the prophet, and so he's seeing the future. He's speaking of his people as us. So he's putting himself into this scene, and he is saying, yeah, I've seen it. The fellow that wrote Yada Yahowah, his stage of this journey is now certain. He's coming for us. He's as sure as the sunrise. Boy, that ever true. Every morning, at or before sunrise, we're back at it. He will come for us. Yes, I have. Like the showers of spring rains, as they enable the gathering of the harvest, and that is exactly the purpose. As the final Zeroah, I am here to have that final 2 harvest to be as productive as is possible. And God is providing the showers and the spring rains to make this gathering of the harvest as refreshing, as renewing as possible, as those of the land accept this source of teaching and guidance, which is now being put on display. That is the purpose of the Nesh, the sign. It is, by the way, Yara Eretz, which is making the land receptive to the Torah's instructions and directions, which are being made openly known. Yara is the verbal root of Torah, the actionable root of Torah. Hosea, he liberates 6:3. The journey home is all that should matter now. There is so much separating God from his people, and so little time left to bridge that gap. Our focus must be on the harvest. And since Yahweh isn't the one who is going to change, the onus is on his people and on us to encourage their transformation. Fortunately, he revealed where to look, Yada Yahowah, and how to navigate that divide, Yada Yahowah. And now you are privy to God's endorsement of Yada Yahowah. Well, he in the foregoing statement could be addressing Yahweh. It's really unlikely. First, God, even if he was speaking of himself, never works alone. And the initial benefits were delivered by God's collaboration with David, and he did come. He had lived, and he would come again twice more after this was written by Hosea. And so Dode did deliver these benefits, and his herald would then write Yada Yahowah. And those associated with Dode are Moshe, Yada, Eliah, all of whom will be united in purpose and all directed by our King on an ongoing basis. And since Moshe spoke of this moment and what is now the 18th chapter of Devarim, we should keep Hoshea's prophecy in mind and be aware that it is addressing Dode and his herald, Yada. For now, it's important to recognize that while we are in the throes of Yaakov's troubles, as we enter that horrible time, that many Yehudim are for the first time in a very long time going to seek Dayah, to know Yahweh. Spoken using the genuineness of the call stem, the consistency of the imperfect conjugation, and the volitional nature of the cohortative mood, Israelites will want to be persistently perceptive and genuinely discriminating as they process the information God has provided for them to consider in the collaborative effort of Yada Yahowah. Now, since the object of our pursuit is found in the vocabulary that our journey began with, this commitment to go where God's words lead, we have followed them to Yahweh in full recognition that the path would be rigorous and it would be unpopular because it flows against all religious edicts. But in the end, those who invest the time and energy to come to Yada Yahowah will be rewarded. We have Yahweh's stamp of approval, his endorsement, his affirmation that Yada Yahowah will lead you home. Thank you, Yah. Now, after enduring 3 millennia of religious rhetoric, a remnant of God's people will give evidence and reason a chance during the last days. However, even with the presentation of 20,000 pages of amplified translations, genuinely profound and unheralded insights, and supporting commentary throughout, Yada Yahowah, the trek home, is not going to be particularly easy, and it's designed to be a challenge. There are no shortcuts to what we need to know or dumbing it down for the apathetic. The pursuit of knowledge regarding the Almighty requires considerable effort, and that is by design. Eternity is forever, and there must be a filter to preclude those who are lazy or easily distracted, and those who do not enjoy learning. What Hosea recorded, Yahweh saying, also affirms one of the most controversial aspects of Yada Yahowah. I have set dates and expectations, knowing that the next stage of Yahweh's journey is as sure as sunrise. God's return with his Son and our Savior and King is imminent. His relationship with his people will be reconciled, and his Torah guidance will be integrated into the lives of his children, so that we all know, understand, live, and grow. In this light, Mozah depicting the next stage of the journey is based upon Yatsa, the verb which describes the Exodus. Just as Yahweh withdrew his people from Mitzrayim, the crucibles of religious and political oppression nearly 3,500 years ago, he is returning to deliver a remnant of his people from the religious and political threat of Babylon. This commingling and intermixing of religion and politics, and in particular from a world polluted by Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and Marxist progressive platitudes. Further, with Kun, we know that God's arrival is assured. It has been, I should say, decided, appointed, and established. As surely as the sun rises in the east, Yahweh will return with the Messiah on Yom Kippurim in year 6000 Yah, and it will lead to the dawning of a new day, an opportunity to return to the garden during Sukkah, beginning on the Shabat of October 7th, 2033. Also, with celestial fanfare, just as the sacrifice of the red heifer will occur to the backdrop of a full solar eclipse, we enter the Shabbat of October 7th and our return to the garden in Sukkah under the beautiful spectacle of a lunar eclipse. One is kind of eerie when the moon blots out the sun's light in the midday. But the other's one of the most spectacular events of celestial fanfare, as the shadow of the earth covers the full moon and creates just a beautiful spectacle in the sky. And we will see that on our entry into the millennial celebration of Sukkah. There will be a marvelous harvest of reconciled Yehudim on Towrah, occurring on Friday evening at sunset, September 23rd, 2033, as a dying planet is poised to be bathed in life-giving rains. Beginning 10 days thereafter on Kippurim, the earth will be restored to the conditions experienced during Gan Eden. Yara refreshed, replete with the ultimate source of guidance and teaching on display. We know this because Yara is the verb Yahweh selected to describe the purpose of his Torah. Why religious people came up with law when God said Torah is based on Yara, and Yara means source from which guidance, instruction, teaching, and directions flow. The rain that Hosea is predicting was explained in Joel, and as this statement suggests, it will come in two waves, one to redeem, the other to reconcile. And yet there is more to learn about this day when Israel will finally seek to know Yahweh. More than just restoring showers are going to fall on the land in anticipation of the final harvest. And in this way, Hosea serves as the ideal prequel to one of the most revealing prophecies of our time. It is particularly relevant when contemplating Shabuah, the promise of the Shabbat, because it is highly descriptive of the time of Yaakov's troubles, from which the Bikurim are removed. Through this revelation, those coming home are better able to appreciate the hell from which they are being withdrawn. At this time, Israel will suffer, and Yoel alerts those left behind that they're going to endure a Holocaust far worse than the one that occurred 80 years prior. As bad as these things appear now for Israel, surrounded nearly 1,000 to 1 by enraged Muslims with progressive screaming out against them, it is about to get unimaginably worse. But on that note, we're going to conclude this program. This has been an episode of Qatsyr-Harvest. It is the first that I have delivered in the last year prior to the fulfillment of Shabuah on May 22nd, 2026. And we will return to what was written by the prophet Yoel, a name that means Yahweh is God, beginning in Joel 1:1, when we return to this ongoing story of the Qatsyr-Harvest tomorrow. Thank you so much for listening. May Yahweh bless. This has been an episode of the YAHOWAH blog, and I am your host, Craig Winn.